Oh, yeah, he thought. This is why I became a lawyer, to buy myself this kind of freedom. He took another breath and let it out, long and slow. Chad was 32 and had just purchased a new 40-foot cabin cruiser. Along with his wife, his pal Dave Peligro, and Dave's new girlfriend, he was cruising out to Clarita Island off the coast of Los Angeles on this sunny June day. They were 45 minutes into the 1-hour trip from Newport Beach. The sea was fairly flat, tiny waves here and there, and they'd arrive soon. They had already passed the better-known Catalina Island, and Chad could see their destination in the distance. The plan was to work on their tans, then settle down for some lunch, though Chad was getting a little hungry already. "Get me a sandwich, will you, Gabby?" On a molded seat, his wife gave Chad an angry, "I'm not your maid" look, but she tossed him a saran-wrapped turkey and mayo anyway. "Here you are, Your Majesty." He chuckled. "Thanks, Gab." "Nice, huh?" Dave Peligro said to his date, Teresa Landers. In a tight sky-blue top, white shorts, and too much makeup, Teresa surveyed the water. "Beautiful." She turned to her host. "Thanks for having us, Chad." "I'm glad you guys could make it. I'm sure I would have been bored if it were just me and Gabby out here." Teresa shook her head. She didn't like Chad much. He was an arrogant preppy in a red polo who didn't wear sunglasses. But it was his boat, and she'd never lunched off Clarita Island before. She looked forward to getting there. With the exception of a small tourist area with restaurants, docks, and a beachside bar, the bulk of Clarita Island was undeveloped, overrun by trees and thick shrubbery. Clarita's western shore, mostly jagged black rocks, was downright desolate. Miles away from the clattering human noise of the island's eastern side, it was barren of people, the only sounds from the wind and tiny breaking waves. Gliding on a current of air, a seagull appeared from behind the trees. A couple 100 feet high, the bird flew over the dark ocean and looked down, scanning for fish. It saw absolutely nothing. And yet, something was there. The bird had missed them. They were perfectly still, just below the surface, watching it. The gull spotted something and dove down. It plunged quickly, but then, just yards from the water, veered off. It had seen a strand of kelp, long and greenish-brown, and mistaken it for a fish. Carried by momentum, the tiny flyer ripped across the water, unknowingly passing a single pair of black eyes. Then it passed a second pair. Then 100. But still nothing moved. The eyes simply shifted as the little feathered body tore past. They were all watching it. Chad Tompkins cut the gas, and the boat came to a bobbing stop. They were a few hundred yards from Clarita's main docks, where the mammoth Clarita Ferry had just deposited the latest batch of tourists, mostly families with obnoxious kids. To the right of the docks, Chad eyed a beach slightly larger than a Walmart aisle, jam-packed with out-of-shape sun-worshippers. He found it unappetizing, to say the least. "You guys don't want to stop here, do you?" Gabby, Dave, and Teresa all shook their heads. Chad nodded. "My thoughts exactly." The lawyer hated crowds. As he started up the boat, he looked forward to the solitude of Clarita's always deserted western shore. There were more of them. Another 100 had crept up from below, joining the ones that were already studying the seagull. They still didn't move. They just watched the bird glide above the waterline. Then their eyes shifted. From behind the trees, 24 more gulls flew out over the water, also scanning for fish. Looking down, the bird saw nothing but empty seas. Then one of the creatures below them moved. From 10 feet down, it swam toward the surface, a winged ray, flapping much like the birds themselves. A second creature rose, then a third, then 100. They ascended quickly all at once, shot clear out of the ocean, their bodies flapping frantically in the air. There were so many that they were difficult to make out precisely. They were thick little animals, larger than the gulls, jet black on their tops, gleaming white on their undersides. In the air, their wings moved much faster than in the water, their flapping rapid and uncoordinated. They rose to various heights, none more than 10 feet, then belly flopped right back in. Then they leaped out again. Then again, and again, and again. As the gulls watched them, their tiny hearts were beating faster than normal. They were birds and had bird brains, but on an instinctive level, what they were seeing made them nervous. The strange creatures from the sea were trying to fly. Where the hell is it? Chad Tompkins had been to Clarita's western tip before, but he still didn't see the familiar rock outcropping. Dave Peligro smiled at his date. "We'll get there soon." Teresa nodded, eyeing the tree-lined shore. "I'm not in a rush." But Dave was in a rush, or at least his stomach was. Gabby had made some special salami ham and cheese sandwiches just for him, and he couldn't wait to devour them. He squinted behind his $90 sunglasses, trying to see the western tip. "I think I see it." It was just off the black rocks, right near the pack of seagulls. But then Dave saw something else. Something leaped out of the ocean, then flopped right back in. A single animal. He squinted anew. What the hell was that? A jumping fish? He walked to the bow and pulled off his shades. Only birds were there now. He decided not to mention it. As they motored closer, Gabby eyed the seagulls herself. "Keep away from those birds, Chad. We don't want them pestering us." "Yeah, I wish I had a gun." And the pseudo-yachtsman meant this. The damn birds were in the exact spot in which he wanted to anchor. But as they rumbled closer, the birds scattered, and Chad didn't consider why. "Hey, Dave, get the anchor." "Aw, man, I'm stuffed." They'd just finished lunch, and Dave Peligro was proud of how much he'd eaten. Standing next to Chad, he glanced at Gabby and Teresa, in bikinis now, and stretched out on lounge chairs in the back of the boat. "I could go for a little sun myself." Chad nodded. "Go ahead, I'll be there in a sec." He wasn't in the mood to tan yet. As Dave joined the women, Chad leaned over the guardrail and stared at the sea. It felt good to get away from the office. He blew out a deep breath and watched the tiny breaking waves. He didn't notice the wind pick up. The winged creature was 15 feet below the boat, its horned head pointed straight up. Its eyes were wide open, but it didn't see Chad. It didn't even see the boat. It was blind. A mutant gene had led to the deficiency, just as it occasionally did in humans. The creature was by itself now, every one of its brethren long gone, many thousands of feet away. This one hadn't leaped from the sea earlier because it hadn't been able to. With all the churning caused by the others, it had become disoriented and literally couldn't figure out which way was up. But it had a sense of direction now. It could feel the wind. It began to rise, slowly at first, then much faster. "I hope the wind dies down," Chad thought, eyeing the ripples as a gust blew his collar back. He suddenly squinted. What is that? It was something 10 feet down. He leaned over the guardrail to get a better look. It looked like a pair of beer bottles. Litter bugs, he thought. But then he saw the bottles were rising, rather fast. Wait, they weren't bottles at all. Jesus Christ, they were eyes. He jolted away frantically. Noticing, Gabby rose from her chair. "What's wrong, honey?" Dave stood. "You okay, Chad?" Chad backed away as fast as he could, when suddenly a thick winged ray shot out of the sea. It simultaneously caught the wind, then, out of control, blew straight toward him. Trying to get away from it, Chad backed up faster, but tripped and fell. The thing rushed closer. He tried to get up,